everyone. Welcome to today's podcast. And for today, I have Carrie as our guest. And we'll be talking about some things people don't like talking about, though they know they should be talking about it and working towards it. So it's going to be an interesting episode. Um, so over to you, Carrie. You've had a wonderful career so far, both in corporate world and then now you started your business. But maybe for people to understand your journey a bit, maybe if you can just introduce yourself. How do you typically introduce yourself when you're on platforms like this?
Yeah, sure. I just like to give a little background about where I've been and what I do. So I'll start there. How's that?
Good.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I had a long. I've been more than 20 years in corporate America. I worked at a Fortune 500 company and then a privately held franchise operation, and I was in pretty high visibility roles there. The Fortune 500, I was the head of communications for the entire organization. And then I was a director of marketing as well. So those roles, came with a lot of responsibility. And of course, I experienced career fatigue at certain points along the journey. And I knew at one point that I needed to do something different for myself because I just couldn't see myself working until I was 65, sitting at a desk every
Mm.
day, making that commute. It was just too hard on me physically and mentally. It was very stressful. So, a couple of years ago, I started my own marketing agency, very successful, and I ended up thinking, you know what? Other people need to know how to do what I did. And
Mm.
so today I am teaching people how to do the same thing. I'm a volunteer mentor with score.org, which is part
Wow,
of, it's a charter of the Small Business Administration. And I also have a coaching business.
wonderful. You mentioned career fatigue, and I'm sure that's not peculiar to you. When did you first experience what we call career fatigue? Was it early in your career or towards, yeah, maybe later? Can you
It
remember?
was at a couple different points, but I'll tell
Yeah.
you the turning point for me when I realized that the career that I had chosen and the life I had chosen in the corporate world wasn't working came after about 4 years. I was working at the Fortune 500 company. I had my first promotion, and yet I still wasn't making enough money. And I found myself at a food bank with my children, because I couldn't afford groceries. And that's when I kind of knew like the wheels started turning that what I had been taught success looks like actually wasn't for me. So I had inherited that script. We're taught in school how to essentially school trains us to work, right? You show up, you sit at your desk, they ring the bell for lunch break and recess, and then you come back. So I realized then that wasn't working for me. I was constantly missing my kids' school
Mm.
events. I was a single mom raising three kids. And, mind you, I was in Orange County, California, and I still am today, but this is a very affluent place. Nobody employed at a Fortune 500 company should need to go to a food bank.
I'm just thinking about that. So you were getting what most people will typically want, which is promotion, right? And I guess with the bigger job title and maybe not so much, but an increase in pay, but that wasn't still enough. People go through this. Why do you think they don't try to do something about it? Do you think they're in love with the job title, or just that look of being successful from the outside?
Well, there's a few things. I mean, I definitely think there's a security that comes with having a full time 9 to 5 job.
Yeah.
People believe that they're secure. They think that, they know there's layoffs, but they don't think it will happen to them. And the job title is definitely one of those things. They start to tie that to their identity.
Mm.
And taking a risk of starting something different or going somewhere else, they're going to lose that identity. So there, there's definitely the fear of failure,
Huh?
particularly financial failure. They're walking away from a place that they have health insurance, they have a 401k, they have a regular paycheck, maybe a bonus, and they have this great prestigious title. They can see, every day that people admire them and look up to them and they feel part of something. And that becomes part of their identity. You're absolutely right. So a lot of people just can't imagine their lives without that.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes I speak with some people, and I'm not saying everyone should be an entrepreneur, but you can see that affinity to the title. Like you said, that's where they get their sense of being. And I feel that's sad because we are more than our titles. In fact, some people are so hooked on the titles in a particular company, right?
Yeah.
That even yeah, so it's not even just no longer about the title. That's one layer, but the other layer is also about the name of the company. And for them, it's security, even when they don't feel very secure. Like jobs are changing, jobs are changing, and all of that. But for someone like you mentioned 3 kids. It got to a point where you had to make this change. Um, were you not scared?
Oh,
And if you were, how did you overcome that fear?
yeah. So, by the way, that moment in the food bank came about, let's say, 14 years before I
Mm,
actually made my move.
yeah.
In that moment, I was very much dependent on that paycheck, but it created a lot of stress because there were layoffs going on all around me on a regular basis. And I knew that I needed to, even though I couldn't leave then, I knew I needed to start thinking about how I could get more income. So I started a side business and I became a mobile notary. And I very quickly figured out that, what I did was I would take loan documents to people's homes, on the behalf of the lender or the escrow company, and they would sign those documents. And I quickly figured out that I needed to like stack a bunch of these, right? So if I'm going to leave the house on a Saturday for 1 hour, I might as well leave for 5 hours and do five loan signings instead of one. And, then I'd walk away with a pretty hefty check at the end of that day. So, and I did smart things like I didn't spend all my time driving, right? I didn't take take those loan signings that were more than like 5 or 10 miles away because that's just killing my time. So when people start side hustles, I always tell them don't necessarily do what you like, do what makes money, right? So I didn't love running around and going to people's homes and signing documents, but it wasn't bad either, and especially for the money. But I've seen people try to turn their hobbies into something and sell it. And anything that requires you to do hourly work isn't
Oh,
scalable and it's not going to earn you good money.
it's an interesting perspective. And the reason I say that is because I'll say I'm of the school of thought, and yeah, it's good we're having this conversation from probably different angles. So I feel like doing something one doesn't really enjoy, right, outside of work is almost like work again. Right? But hearing your perspective on maybe not just your hobby, but something that is scalable, is it possible to work on your hobby and make it scalable? That's
It,
for me,
it,
that's the question. What do you
it
think?
is, yeah. It
Mm,
depends on what your hobby is.
mm,
So I had a recent conversation with a woman who was selling her art and she was complaining about her side hustle not making enough money. And I said, well, let me see your art. And when I looked at it, it was like very intricate little beaded, very
mm,
ornate pieces. And I could see the problem immediately. I said, you know what, this probably takes a lot of time for you.
yeah.
And and what do you sell it for? And what's your hourly rate then? So when she looked at it that way, she realized, yeah, this isn't the right thing. For somebody who, I don't know, I'll give you an example. Maybe if you really love photography, maybe you can start selling your photos that's something, it's a hobby, right? That you could do, and you could just take photos and post them on Instagram or whatever and be done with it. But maybe a better way to be making money is to start doing wedding photography or real estate photography or travel photography, you know, and then you can sell those images to stock photo services and have a little outlet for that. Or you can make packages of images that you could sell as branded
Yeah.
images, right? So take pictures of boring things like bowls of fruit and flowers and, and notebooks that people would want as a stock image to represent something in their brand.
And that's something that is, I'll say maybe today's world is affording us the opportunity to see that some of the things we felt were not very important to people, a lot more people are finding value in them. Just like you said, like a picture of a fruit, maybe someone is trying to actually build a brand around fruits, and then they can use such images. So, do you think the modern economy we find ourselves also is influencing the ability to create wealth from a side hustle better than it was a couple of years back?
I think so, especially with AI. I mean, I
Mm.
myself create AI images and sell them to stock services just
Ooh,
because I can.
I need to learn that.
You just go to learn Midjourney really well. And these are skills that like anybody can do right now.
Mm.
Anybody can learn Midjourney just by probably going to YouTube or taking a simple course, and then figure out how to make images. I made a whole
Oh,
series of summer beverage images that sold like crazy.
wow.
Pictures of drinks, very, very sexy drinks with fruits and droplets of water, just all through Midjourney, and sold those on a stock service.
I've heard Midjourney is really good, but I haven't tried it to that extent. I just go to see some images. But now you said this, I definitely need to have a second look at that. Um, so another question is it possible to build a financially stable side hustle before you actually then leave your full-time job? Because that will solve the fear of a lot of people. We talked about the financial security, which is very important. You don't want to leave a job where you know you're getting monthly income. So the question is it possible to have a side hustle that will pay you as probably as much as your full-time job for a couple of months consistently before you then move to being an entrepreneur or a business owner? Is it possible? Have you seen that
Yeah,
happen?
yeah, it is. And let me just give you a little bit of an example. So
Yeah.
that just from that mobile notary business, I could have done that full time. However, the market for refinancing and loans is, the housing market is very cyclical. And there would be downtimes, and I don't tolerate downtimes very well. And I knew that about myself. So the next thing I did was after my kids grew, right? I'm raising kids in the household as a single mom, so I
Yeah.
need the income to buy them things. But I also was able to start saving. And I eventually saved up enough money to buy a 10-unit apartment complex. So I had some good credit. I got some funding and bought that. And that brought me monthly cash flow. So that's something that people can do. And then you could save that cash flow and then buy your next unit. So anything that has cash flow, passive income is a good thing to do. That's certainly something you could do. But I know there's a huge creator economy right now as
Yeah.
well. And it sounds easy, but it's not. It's like, oh, just create this digital product and sell it. It's not that easy. There's a lot that goes into that. It's still very doable, and you can certainly start that and scale that while you're employed in your 9 to 5 job.
So let's assume there is this person who is probably going through all the things we've talked about, probably a good title, but insufficient funds. The time, obviously, when you have a full-time job, is not fully your time, right?
Mm.
Yeah, and that person has had this in mind to do for a couple of years. This person wants to start, but and I get this a lot because people reach out to me to say the same thing. I just don't know how and where to start. So for someone like you that has been helping people do that a switch or transition, what should they do? Where can they start? How can they start? So this is person who just wants, let's say maybe the marketing manager in their company, right? So how can they start this journey into entrepreneurship or business ownership from a 9 to 5?
Yeah, so they can start after hours, of course.
Hmm.
But again, you want something you can turn into a system. So maybe if you're in marketing, you've got to look at what you can do. You can do content creation, maybe some graphic design, maybe some video editing, whatever it is that you can do, you can start packaging that up as a monthly service. And that's actually how I started my business. I started it
Mm.
as a monthly service, doing some email marketing. So these are things that, the important part is that you have to be able to scale and you have to have systems in place that help you do that.
The mindset you have as an employee, will that same mindset sustain you as a business owner? Or do they have to change the way they think, basic level?
Yeah, there is a change, but if you're coming from a corporate environment, especially, you've seen how the decision makers work and think. So, as an employee, you're thinking about, do I have permission to do this? Is
Yeah.
this going to be risky? So, you're focused on those types of things. And when you're running your own show, there's nobody to ask. So, if it's risky, you get to take that risk without asking anybody else. And if it's, if it's every decision is yours, and as a result of that, every consequence is yours, and every positive outcome and success is yours. So you have to really be a little more strategic in your thinking and forward looking as to what might happen and preparing for all the scenarios.
Yeah, and I think that risk factor is still something most people won't want to take, because with working in a corporate environment, right, business takes the risk. And so even if it doesn't go very well, you can still throw it back to your boss, I guess, which is not what they want, but that happens. But in the business world, like you said, you have to just take that bold step and be ready for whatever comes. But most times it leads to bigger opportunities, that we can say at least. The chances of you scaling your impact is also more, at least from my experience, um, running a business versus being a full-time employee. The opportunities and the impact is way more than when you are. So it depends. I also feel it depends on what level of risk the person is willing to take as well. Um, let's talk about personal branding and in today's world, building a side hustle. How important is that? And I think a lot of employees are a bit shy when it comes to personal branding. They
Yeah.
barely put their skills out there. So the question is, how important is it today? And what should they do? What tools or strategies can they use?
Right. Actually, tomorrow I'm presenting a webinar. It's actually a training for my clients, and I'm talking about
Oh,
personal branding. And
nice.
uh, yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is huge for B2B services. So if that's your area, and that's my area, and you do need to have a bit of a personal brand there if you're going all in. And that's why, the side hustle that you start with may not be the job that you create for yourself. So it may not be your ultimate business, but it's a place to make money. So when I did side hustles, and there's tons of them that you can do behind the scenes without your employer ever knowing. But when it comes to being public, that's a really tricky dance because you want to build yourself up as a professional, but yet you know your company's looking over your shoulder. So, how do you do that? And I would say just start with your profile. Make your profile about how you help people, and not so much about just your job title and your
Mm,
company that you're working with. And then post helpful content for your target audience. Now, again, that you have to decide for yourself your comfort level, because if you're trying to keep this from your coworkers, you don't want to start posting all of a sudden about something that looks really far distant from
yeah.
what you do in your 9 to 5 job. But if it's not an issue, you can certainly go ahead and do that. There's a huge vulnerability involved in presenting your personal brand. You have to be open and transparent and willing to share professional challenges and personal
Yeah.
stories along the way. So, you have to figure out how much you're comfortable with sharing and how much you're not comfortable sharing.
That's a good perspective. And I can relate because I started building my brand while still working full time, and I did that for more than a year. And for me,
Yeah.
the strategy was easy. So I share my personal stories on what it felt like working in the area I was working in, and it was something I enjoyed totally, right? And coincidentally, and maybe I was quite fortunate because my team were also trying to just position ourselves as one of the go-to teams, both within the organization and outside, that understands how to do what we were doing. So it was a win-win for myself and the team because I was the one who was willing to put myself out there to say, oh, we do this, we do it well. Obviously, without going into the technicalities, but how can you um, channel that problem or make that problem look very relatable, and also then prefer solutions that an average person can relate with without going fully into all the technicalities. So for me, that was a simple strategy that worked. And yeah, it really helped me.
In my case, I was a marketing director.
Hmm.
So if I make the shift on LinkedIn, which I didn't do at the time, but I could have started talking a lot about things related to marketing, email
Yeah,
marketing, content marketing, different things that I knew a lot about, and just positioning myself as really adept at those things.
indeed, indeed. I think there's an opportunity. Usually I say to people, if you have a full-time job, you most likely have the right skills. You
Yeah.
most likely have a network, no matter how small you feel it is, but there's a network there. And you have probably other resources. So it's thinking about the skills you have, and your skills are beyond your current job, they're beyond that organization. Personally, that's what I think. In fact, I was reading a post earlier today, and the person was talking about what it means to actually have job security. And the train of thought was people see job security as the current role you occupy in a current organization. Traditionally, that's how we see job security. But this post was talking about job security from three aspects. One is your skill security, because if your skill got you that job, that skill will most likely get you another job. So you can actually be secured if you upskill yourself very well. um, the person talked about network security as well as part of like job security. So if in your current job you're able to build very strong network within and outside your organization, then you actually have a security, a form of security beyond your current role and that company. And finally, your brand security, what people know you for, which is what we've been talking about. Just making yourself a thought leader, constantly bringing up points and sharing with people. Um, for that person, it's like that's what makes you secure. It's not tied to a role, it's not tied to a company, it's you, it's your skill, it's your network, it's your brand. If you can develop these three things, then most likely you have a foreseeable job security regardless of what's going on, the noise around. So I found that like really insightful because that's something most corporate people overlook. And we're not saying you should start underperforming at work, and that's another thing, right? The fear with some people starting a side hustle is because they feel is going to affect my performance at work. So for someone like you who had to do something on a Saturday, how did that play out? Did it affect you, your 9 to 5 when you started that?
No, it didn't at all. It
Mm,
was 100% after hours. There's no way I could have done that. I mean, the mobile notary involves printing a lot of documents and then, traveling out to people's homes. So it was 100% done after hours, and it worked. But what you're saying about network security, that's one thing I also do emphasize is, if nothing else, and you're thinking about leaving your 9 to 5 and starting your own business, build that network while you're still employed, especially
yeah.
because all the people you connect with within your company, within your vendors' companies, these are so important down the road.
For me, one of my strategy was actually the podcast as well. First, it was something I enjoyed doing because I just had loved having these conversations, but I saw it also as a good um, way to get connected with more people beyond my typical 9 to 5. And I think it proved really valuable. So people should just be a bit more strategic, right? Nobody expects, I don't think it's wise to just leave your job and jump
Nope.
to something when, yeah, when you've not even tested. For me, I did something interesting. I took, I went on a leave period just to test my business model. If I'm to do that full
Oh.
time, what will it look like? So
Hmm.
while others took leave to travel, and I'm not saying that's bad, but I was so clear on what I wanted to do. So I actually took my annual leave. And within that annual leave, I worked for myself like that was what I wanted to do. And then checked. I was like, okay, first, do I really enjoy this stuff? Because one thing is doing something as a side hustle, but when it becomes your full-time job, you might actually not find the same drive as you had when you were working a 9 to 5 and doing that thing. I don't know if you've experienced that before with your clients as well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely make sure you love what you do, and that you can do it every day. I think one
Yeah,
of the appealing things about some 9 to 5 jobs is that, every day can be a little bit different, right? If you're a
yeah,
professional, you go in and you have certain projects you might be working on, or certain things you need to do. And if you can keep your side hustle and your new business interesting for yourself, that will be key to your success as well. Yeah. And I love it that you took a leave to test it out.
yeah.
That's a brilliant way to go, because you don't want to jump off the cliff without a parachute. So
Yes,
you have to
yes.
know that
In
it
fact,
works.
yeah, that's what I teach people in my own program. I tell them like, don't just jump, right? Test it. And sometimes when you test it, you will actually see that, maybe I even just love the idea of being an entrepreneur. I don't really want to be one.
Yeah.
Some people also love the idea of, oh, you're a founder. You did this, you did that, because they're seeing so many people with success stories, right? But behind like that 1% success story, you have like 20 other people, 20% that failed. It's the ability to strategically test it and you don't lose focus, because personally, I'm not a fan of people underperforming at work, because an A player is always an A player, regardless of where you find yourself, whether in another person's business or in your business. If you're an A player, you think like an A player. And for me, that's what makes you unique. So I wasn't underperforming at work. I was very careful about that, because you want to live on a high as well. And that
Yes.
confidence will help you even when you start your business. You can come out to say, okay, I did this, right? And recently they had to talk to someone like while having conversations with different people, and something led to a conversation with somebody I worked with, and the person gave a fantastic review. And for me, that's what a smooth transition should be like.
When I left, my company supported me very much. They
Oh, nice.
understood what I was doing. Well, they work with entrepreneurs because they were franchise organizations. So, like McDonald's, right? So people buy
Yeah,
McDonald's and then they make it their own business. And so they understood the entrepreneur mindset.
yeah,
And I remember they actually acknowledged that in a meeting, and it was like a
Wow.
celebration of my leaving to go be an entrepreneur. It was very, very much supported in that environment.
Wow. I think that's beautiful. And that's something I will encourage other companies. I know it's not easy losing one of your best talents, but if we look at the bigger picture, right? And see how well you're speaking about them, I'm sure that is commendable. It shows like that workspace has a positive vibe, positive energy. So maybe that's what some job owners should also look at, right? How can we make work environment a place where others can thrive, and even when they are
Yeah, I
leaving,
mean,
yeah.
I don't think they loved it that I was leaving,
No, of course nobody will, but
but
it,
but
yeah,
I wasn't going to a competitor, so that was good. They did get what I was doing, so
yeah,
but yeah, filling the role was a lot for them. I know
mm,
that. But I also, I had a really long transition. I didn't just say, I'm out in 2 weeks. I said, look,
mm.
I know this is going to pose a hardship. I'll stay on until you hire someone, and then I will stay on for a month after that to train them. And that's exactly what I did. So they appreciated that a lot.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
honorable, and I that's how things should be done, like responsibly. Um, Another thing people struggle with is creating offers. I don't know about you, but one of the most difficult things I had to face was creating an offer and actually selling it. Because in the 9 to 5, the way we get paid is our salary.
Yeah.
It's literally, well, as an engineer, right? So I worked as an engineer, so I wasn't customer facing. Maybe in customer facing roles, they learn how to do that. But for someone like me who is an engineer, it was very difficult because I was thinking, should I even be selling this? How much should I put to it? So how can people create compelling offers for their side hustles and
You
their
know,
businesses?
it's super, like you said, it sounds so simple, right?
Mm,
And the way I start is I say, okay, you want to create one offer for one person that solves one problem. But when
mm,
you say that, it brings up more questions than it answers. So you have to really be introspective about this. So you have to look at, you know, the one solution to one problem, first of all, and the one person. You have to understand who you're speaking with. Who is it that's your target audience that needs your services the most, right? And identifying that person isn't always easy. So, what problem are you going to solve? If you start there, you ask yourself, who am I solving it for? So, I'll give you an example. When I left, I knew I was going to solve the problem of small B2B services who don't have time to do their own marketing, specifically email marketing. Okay, so that was my niche. B2B services that, are small businesses. Really, I'm talking like probably less than 10 employees that need help with their local marketing because small businesses are running everything in their
yeah,
company just like I am. And you don't want to focus on too much. If you focus too broadly, you're not going to serve anybody. It's tricky to find that niche. You have to do a lot of market research and you have to really understand the challenges and pain points of your ideal customer. So, you were an engineer, but you were also in an industry, and I believe, weren't you working for, wasn't it oil and gas industry?
yes, yeah, the
So
energy
you knew
industry.
that niche really well. I was working, for a franchise that supported small businesses. I knew that niche really, really well. That is where I started. I don't know if that's where you started exactly because we
Yeah,
haven't
yeah.
gotten real
Most
specific about that. But
most of my clients, yeah, are actually from my industry because they can
yeah,
relate with the things I talk about. Yeah.
so it's helpful to start with something you know deeply. I knew the ins and outs. I knew what their their challenges, their struggles, what keeps them awake at night. I had been around them and helped so many of them start and grow their businesses that I knew what it was like, even without having been in it myself. And then, of course, once I got in it myself, I knew what it was all about firsthand as well. So look to what you already know really well. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's even of a former version of yourself, right? So maybe you're helping someone that's at a point that you were at 5 or 10 years ago. That's always a good place to look as well for your niche. So that's where I am today with my coaching business. I was a mid-career professional who was burnt out and realizing that the script for success that I had been taught was broken and I needed to create my own. That's what I'm helping other people do.
I worked with a consultant while starting my program as well. And one of the things he said to me is the best solution to solve is a problem that you faced and you
Yep.
found a way. Like it's easy base level, you can resell what you did that is undocumented. You can actually document that process, think about it fully, and then systemize it, productize it, and you can sell that. And for me, it made it easy to then see from a business perspective, like, okay, this makes sense. I was at this point, and now I'm here. These are the things I did, and these are the things I could have done better. Maybe if I can bring all of that together and test it with some other person, which I did actually. So I tested my solution with a number of people for free. I don't know if that's the strategy to go, but it worked for me because I could then properly refine and just bring in that whole engineering mindset to things like, yeah, we had our flow. So I just used that to go about it.
Yeah.
Finally, yeah, go ahead.
No, that's the way it's done. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the best way. Yeah, for sure.
Finally, before we end today's session, just you talked about yeah, you were doing a lot. You were almost, I guess, almost burnt out. It was stressful. Now, that is another issue or concern for most people in the
Mhm.
corporate world that want to transition, right? If I'm feeling
Yeah.
so much pressure in my 9 to 5, how can I even think of adding something to it? So how do they will I say create that balance so that they won't because if someone is burnt out, then they won't even be able to do anything. So while building a side hustle, right, how do they ensure that they don't overwhelm themselves and burn out?
Yeah, it is overwhelming, and I still feel somewhat guilty about that, when it comes to my kids. Now my mom did move to where I lived so she could help
Yeah,
with watching them, because I always say you can do overtime. You can give 150%, but only for a short period of time. So if 100% is your day job and 50% more is your day job plus your side hustle, you can do that, but only for a short time. So you have to make it really worth your while to do that because, yeah, you're going to be extra exhausted. Things will be neglected. But I think it really helps to keep your big picture in perspective. Think about your why. Why are you doing this? So for me, I didn't want my kids to go without things.
yeah,
I want to leave a legacy now. I want to teach people. I want to teach as many people as I can to be self-sufficient and and financially well off, especially ones who are struggling like I did. I really struggled. So I think that's where we start.
thank you so much. Finally, just how can people reach you if they want to connect with you and just probably discuss and read more about what you do? How can they
Yeah,
connect?
absolutely. I have my 9 to Thrive newsletter, which comes out every Saturday. It offers exclusive tips and strategies and inspirational stories for aspiring entrepreneurs. We talk there a lot about side hustles and strategies and preparing to leave your 9 to 5 job and what works and what doesn't. So that can be found on my website, which is just my name. It's carrieloranger.com. I also have a mini course that helps you lay the foundational steps to take while you're still employed before you leave that 9 to 5.
Good one.
And yeah, I do some one-on-one coaching on LinkedIn and things like that. It's all there on the website.
Thank you. And I'll share the link to your website. And
Yeah, I'm also
yeah,
on LinkedIn. I give a lot of nuggets on LinkedIn every day too, so people can
okay.
find me there.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for just more or less sharing so much on one call, like a master class for us. And we truly appreciate it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's been a big pleasure. I'm so happy that you had me on, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Same here. All right. Take care and bye for now.
All righty, bye bye.